Hello, my name's Kevin. Um, I got 4 views on my last video. Yay. But I have a friend here, and we're gonna just have a normal conversation for us.
Hi.
And anyway, so we started this once before, so this is take two. Um, so we'll try this again. So, what were we talking about? Because I had technical difficulties.
We had started out.
Nope.
Oh,
Crap. Well, yeah,
We
stay
were-
there. I don't want you getting in
Yeah.
the. Thank you.
We had said we are friends through church,
Right.
and we've known each other going on 3 years now.
Right. I joined the church before you, right?
Yes.
And then prior to that, you have been over the years. How many churches? 7?
We counted. This is our 8th church. My 8th church.
Okay, and that was from childhood on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I counted. The first church. It was the Catholic Church, which my family partly raised me in.
And I met them at Thanksgiving.
Yes, you did.
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome.
The churches I have attended since becoming, a Protestant, and I would say a believer, have all been very biblically focused.
Okay.
Was what, like, my top priority of they need to preach the word truthfully.
Well, how would you distinguish somebody that, as you said, treats the word truthfully, and let's say somebody that doesn't? Do you have a few areas within the Bible that you're like, here are my my little tripwires for pastors to look at and say if they, it's like reading your favorite book. If you're like reading Lord of the Rings and it's like somebody's like, oh, I never heard the Shire had issues, and it's like, did you read the books? Oh no, I watched the movies. Not even the extended?
Right. Or the movie, not that example, but a movie made from a book, and you say that's not it at all.
Right. So, I mean, in my experience, I've been a believer since 1992. So,
Okay.
I mean, I had a very spiritual experience, but I was in the midst of something that was pretty traumatic, and it was almost like I knew if I was going down one path, it wasn't going to be good.
Sure.
And I'm like, okay, I'll take a risk and I'll give my life to Jesus, and we'll see how this, because otherwise it ain't going to go well. But for you that might have been converting to Protestantism, because I'm sure that was hard within the family.
It was a little. My family, we quit going to church when I was in elementary school. It just got replaced with other activities, and I would not say my parents are devout Catholics.
Right.
Since then, but my experience was more investigating Christianity as one of a number of world religions, and coming to the conclusion that it was the true religion, and that if it was true and what the Bible said was true, then I needed to adjust my life to conform to what God says.
I think I had a very similar thing, because it was like, you throw a ball up, you see a ball go down. We know that gravity is responsible, even though we don't know how.
Sure.
And when I read parts of, let's say, Ecclesiastes. When I read Ecclesiastes, and it's like, where does the wind come from? Where does the wind go? Only God knows. You're
Yeah.
kind of like, we may not have, we may have, I mean, we know a lot of things. I think we look at scripture and we go, oh, well, we look at through our cultural lens
Sure.
and we want to impose certain things on it. We want to make it relevant for us.
Right.
And so, therefore, how, when assessing a church, I mean, it's like, okay, they lose a little bit of John, they add a little bit of Old Testament in there. That's something.
No, I think so. Yeah, definitely. There's some criteria. I am not partial to topical sermons. I really appreciate pastors who take a section of the Bible, a book, and go through verse by verse. Is that expository preaching? I can't remember.
Well, it's a form of biblical theology.
Yeah.
You know, biblical theology versus systematic, which is systematic theology. You're going for across the whole spectrum. How does God deal with sin?
Okay.
Or the concept of love, or where does God law? You know, how the Old Testament laws jive with New Testament grace-filled something or other.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're all, but so would you say that? So let's get back to. So you want somebody that goes through and doesn't bounce around, because we've seen. I think I'm hearing you correctly when it's like when somebody bounces around, it can lead to a type of congregation that's more like invaders of the body snatchers,
Yeah.
one of us. And it's
Yeah.
like, why should I be one of you?
Right.
Can somebody reason with me here? Because I think out there in the internet, you know, the Sam Harris, the Richard Dawkins, they kind of see our faith as like, oh, you believe in unicorns and fairies and grumpkins.
Right.
And it's like, well, no, but I do believe it is supernatural, and God's really judicious with his power.
Yeah.
Because he understands the process of blowback. So it's like, you know, it's hard to describe to people because they want to pigeonhole you and say, you're this. And I'm like, no.
Right. No, I read a book once that was talking about fundamentalists, and they had all these labels, and I thought, well, technically I would agree with the word fundamental. Like, I think fundamentals are important, but when you attach connotations and groups, then I'm not a fundamentalist.
Well, I think when people think fundamentalists, they think Westboro.
Yeah.
God hates gays. And it's like, really?
No.
I mean, I would think that ISIS would hate gays more because they're throwing them off buildings, but my opinion.
I think there's validity to that. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that people outside the church don't have a good grasp of what many in the church actually believe, because we don't talk to each other.
Right.
And like you said, that's on me. That's on us. We need to be out there and having dialogue respectfully. I miss the term agree to disagree. I think we've lost that, and
Well, we can agree to disagree with people that are going to leave you alone as their last resort. Unfortunately, I feel as if we're coming up on a time where it's like people keep coming and attacking, and they're just looking to set up the political infrastructure to go after. I mean, it's like this COVID thing. I do believe it is serious.
Yes.
I do believe we shouldn't be exposing people left and right.
Yes.
On the other hand, it starts to sound faithish when it's like, you could have it and not know it. And it's almost like, oh, he's beset by a demon. And you're like, oh, gotta wear my demon mask. And it's like, well, right, but I'm a Christian informed by science and by, I mean, I have knowledge of your background, so would you like to tell everyone what your educational background is?
Sure. I have a bachelor's in science in aviation management.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like you're not out there putting water in the fuel tank pretending it's fuel.
Right.
You gotta if you got water in the fuel tank, that plane ain't gonna run. So there are certain things that you accept that materiality is real.
Yes.
And that you have to accept. You know, you're not gonna be sitting there going, you know, oh, let's pray over my broken leg. You're gonna go, I'm thankful for doctors.
Definitely.
Let's
for
go
sure.
set my leg.
Yes.
We know how it's done. It's a pretty, and we accept the fact that we don't mend ourselves.
Yes.
But
God also gives us the wisdom and the knowledge
Right.
to set a leg, a broken leg.
Right. So we're not Christian scientists.
No.
So,
No.
but we also want Christian scientists to live their lives. We don't want to overwhelm them. We want to meet them on the debate stage so everyone can see, look, these Christian scientists, they have some beliefs that I don't agree with, but if the Christian scientists come to our church and start acting like BLM,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, whoa,
I think we
that's a
need,
little too much. We're going to ask you to leave because we have our liturgical service, and it's kind of like, oh, what?
yeah.
Right.
I think we need to respect the free speech of everyone and be
Good.
willing to listen.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm happy to listen to
Mm-hmm.
people I disagree with. We may not come to a consensus,
Mm-hmm.
but we can still respect each other as human beings
Right.
with experience and background and knowledge.
So, what does that mean to respect someone's experience as a human being? Because we have a lot of people out there that are postmodernists. I'm not sure if you really have a grasp on what postmodernism is, but it's kind of like, I like to make up my own words, and I like to, imbue them with meaning. And if you don't accept my meaning, then I'm going to get upset and start throwing poo. I mean,
That would be not respecting someone
Right.
else's.
well, right.
Yeah.
But it's very visceral. It's, how do you think we should react as Christians? I know that you're not clergy, but you're a mother and a wife, and you're in society now. And so what I'm trying to say is, what do you think we should be looking for in the...
I think so. Let's just set out. I'm older than, say, the millennial generation.
Right.
So I grew up in a time where that visceral emotional response. I can't identify with that. But I need to still live in a world where there's people coming of age and who are growing up that did grow up like that, and I'm trying to understand where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to meet together more one-on-one and less in big mobs, for one, so that we can
Right.
talk. But I think, too, like you and I, you set out some ground rules for our conversation. I think we need to set out ground rules and then recognize when either side, either party has crossed the line and say, we're done. If I or that person feels uncomfortable, they don't want to proceed with the conversation, I think it's okay to stop and come back to it, after maybe we've cooled down or we've thought about the other person's
Right.
opinions and maybe come to terms with where they're coming from. I'm a big believer in trying to understand why someone holds an opinion, even if I don't disagree with the reasoning or the opinion.
There's a couple of ways we can take this, and I want to ask your opinion. Number one, I want to ask you: would you say, are you familiar with the generation breakdowns, Boomer, Gen X?
Yeah.
Would you say you're Gen X?
I'm right. I'm like just a little younger than them.
Oh,
So
you're a millennial.
no, there's this weird sandwich generation between them, and I grew up without the internet,
Right.
but I'm familiar with how the internet works
Okay.
because I was young enough I could and I grew up without cell phones, but I use one. I know how they work.
Right.
And
You're not technically illiterate.
correct.
You can get on Twitter. You can get on Facebook.
Yes.
If you so chose.
And I understand what they are and the purpose of them. But I was a kid during the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And I have memories. I remember when the Berlin Wall came down, but I was not an adult.
Well, let's talk about that. We had a disturbing event happen just recently with the storming of the Capitol.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
I've said for the last couple years, I'm in favor of peaceful demonstrations.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what your slogan is or what your sign says. I think you have a right to free speech and assembly and to proclaim what you believe. But you cross the line when it gets to violence, vandalism, and destruction. Or breaking into private property or
Right.
a building that is closed for good reason. So I think that I feel like I apply those standards to everyone equally. I'm sad that the last week's events came from a side that I would like to agree with, but I don't condone their actions. Standing around shouting and with signs, great. Breaking into buildings and whatever else happened, not good. Not okay.
I have my own thoughts on peaceful protests because I think protests only work if there's a threat of violence. Because you're bringing it's like this. If you have a leader that's like not doing what people agree with or want,
Sure.
maybe he's got involved in wars, maybe he's, let's take for example the Dunbar number, which basically is the maximum amount of people that people can have relationships with at some point is 300.
Huh. Okay.
That's it. After that, your bandwidth is tapped.
Sure.
Some people have more, some people have less. Right. Evens out. Around 300 is mean.
Okay.
Mean. And then you have, so let's say you got a leader, Sargon of Akkad or whatever. He's really tough on people. Well, that's 150 dudes. If you have 35 people that are only trained soldiers, and you got another 250 are like they can rush them.
Okay.
But if they come together for oh geez, I'm talking with my hands. If you have, let's say, a bunch of guys, they're like, no, we don't agree and we're not going to go out. They can protest. And then only those 15 soldiers are doing, there are lots of different ways of doing things. There's strikes.
Yes.
There's revolts where you don't pay your taxes and things like that. But when you get together in a group, you're providing kind of this, in the moment of time, you are saying, we can rally this many people together. For communist China, the reason why they go after so hard the Falun Gong, which is a religious meditation movement. The reason why they went after him so hard is that post Tiananmen Square, they were really unnerved by people gathering together in large groups.
Sure.
And the Falun Gong come together and did a massive Tai Chi protest.
Oh, okay.
In China. And they were the first to use it for, using Facebook or something like that. So the Chinese government did not, what they saw, I believe, what the Chinese Communist Party saw was, oh my gosh, somebody else could rally that many people together. And so your mind already goes to logistics, combat. You remember the whole thing from Princess Bride? Have fun storming the castle.
Yeah.
Do you think they'll do it? No, not a chance.
No.
But it's like, but if you show up with this, even if there's just a few, that's where Antifa comes into play. They take advantage of the people there to shake a fist and protest. And then you have these other people. See, we have to look at it from the point of view of guerrilla warfare, I think. So, a hybrid of spiritual guerrilla warfare.
Okay.
Where we look at it and say, look, the issue's the message. People, and we gotta think creatively how to get the message out there. And then do it in such a way that you're not gathering in large groups.
Sure.
Because I think getting together to protest as a large group is by its nature provocative.
Yes, I understand what you're saying, and I agree.
It's like this idea: everyone get together, shove your fist or shake your fist. It's like, okay, what's being communicated? What's being said? Next time, and we saw it ramp up with Antifa. We saw it ramp up, and they were able, from a guerrilla warfare standpoint, they were able to field hundreds of people consistently. It was a battle, and they just kind of spastically went about it, and according to one person that I saw on the internet, who has some credentials, it was like he was going back and forth from Antifa to the crowd because he had some credentials on him. And he'd go to the police and he'd be like, dude, what's going on? And they're like, we're out here because our higher ups. And it's like, okay, so he's noticing they're just standing there taking the abuse.
Yes.
And he said something very specific. It was like they were using the lightest concentration of tear gas possible. Like 5%. It's like cough, cough.
Yeah.
It's like, really? We're not even, because they're being treated with kid gloves.
Yeah.
And they're more of a threat to themselves than anyone else, but yet they're still fielding a couple hundred people a night.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I'm trying to sort all this out. But it's like Mao Zedong said it best. A gorilla is a fish that swims through a sea of people. So you're using people as a background to hide provocateurs that come in and out. Now, what's different about the conservative elements is that we all like to get together and wear unique things.
Okay.
I represent this, I
Yeah.
represent that. So it's like gang colors, I gotta say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, our gang is, it doesn't help that some advocates of men's rights have been saying, start a gang. Gangs are criminal organizations and they rely on criminal organizations. And if you LARP as a criminal organization, the criminal organizations are going to go, who do you represent?
Yeah.
And I think we have to be careful about that. That's why I like the Babylon Bee.
I have heard of that. Yeah.
The Babylon Bee is kind of like one of those, these are guys that say, oh, you think women can make better men. Let's test that theory. And then we mock it. Kind of like the prophets of old.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like Elisha and Baal.
Yeah.
Remember how Elisha's like, maybe our God's sleeping right now. I'm going to go over here and take a nap. You guys have a good time trying to light that fire.
No.
And then he's like, oh, pour the water on. Oh, let's make this hard. And then God goes,
Yeah. Burns up everything in the water, the rocks.
And it's like, holy crap. Did that just happen? And it's like, and then the man of God says, okay, we've seen a sign. You had your opportunity to present your case. Now God has spoken. And what did they do? They slaughtered like 300 priests of Baal.
Or more. I thought it was like 700. Yeah.
Right. So it's like, let's just say there was 30.
Sure.
Let's say we were exaggerating. There are 30 dudes sitting on a rock going, oh dude, we're screwed.
Yeah.
and see, that's the thing. That's what gets me, is that I think we have ways of fighting back.
Yeah.
We're not going to provide cover for agent provocateurs.
Yes. No, I agree. And, I have not normally wanted to go out and carry
Right.
a sign around. My emotions have tempted me during the COVID quarantine, but in thinking of that, I thought that's not the right way to go about change. And my history is a little fuzzy, so I want to say that civil disobedience during the Civil Rights Act, I can't speak to that, but
okay. I think that's where everyone goes with the protest and Gandhi and all that stuff.
I want peaceful protests or demonstrations.
But with Gandhi, he's telling people, here, go get beat up so we can get good photos. And then we'll take those photos and we'll show all the namby-pamby British people what they're doing to the poor Indians.
Yeah.
I mean, I respect Gandhi in the sense that he was good at marketing his belief, and I think He had a point when he wanted to say you're not acting like a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are points to that.
Yes.
But I disagree with the idea of running a crowd of people roughshod.
Mm-hmm.
I respect the fact he did hunger strikes.
Yeah.
I mean, that he took a personal toll, but to ask people to go forth and, it's like the old adage, a real leader says, "Follow me." A fake leader or a weak leader goes, "Go get 'em, boys."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we need leaders that are willing to. It's like, if you're out in front, you're gonna be the first to go if it goes sideways.
Yeah.
I think people respect that.
Yes. Yes. But I like what you said before about not starting out in a position where you have the opportunity to go sideways so easily.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't set up the circumstance where it's like, oh, I wasn't part of them. You're there.
Yeah.
If you're there, you are providing cover. And what I'm saying now, I don't blame anyone for trying to use whatever thing they have in their toolkit up to this point. But look, if we're going to fight this, we got to fight it right. And sometimes you don't understand why we can't go out and do what they do. But look, if you do, they're going to come down on you. And they're going to make it such that you're not going to have a leg to stand on because, they're not enforcing the law they're enforcing the law for you. You just got in the trap.
Yeah.
It is a trap.
Yes, and Christians and conservatives need to learn this lesson really quickly.
Yes.
We're
going to lose a lot of people that are going to be behind bars, and justly so, because these people can't control themselves.
And not only behind bars, but we lose credibility to our position, our political position.
Absolutely.
And our religious position.
Well, I think our religious position informs our political position.
Yes.
And therefore, it's like too many. I think it's like I feel hobbled. I feel as if I have a limited amount of choices and I want to fight the way I want to fight. And I think we've got to look at it and say, look, if you believe Jesus is the king, and you're going out there representing your king,
yeah,
and you're sovereign, that's beyond earth. In other words, you die, you're going to him, and he's going to be going, so, you thought you could change things the way I told you not to? I mean, because he's going to look at us and say, what did you do? How did you use the tools available to you?
Yes. I think that comes out when Jesus himself was on trial, and he said, if this was the plan, I could call down legions of angels and I could wipe you guys out right now. But that's not what his plan was. His plan was sacrificial death.
Yes, he who?
Jesus.
Jesus. So, I thought it was the Father that set the plan in order and
Okay.
the whole thing. Yeah,
Sure.
I understand Jesus is God and that
Yes.
we believe in the Trinity, but
Yeah, okay.
we have to be careful with our words because somebody's going to come back and say, she thought Jesus went into suicide himself.
No. You're right. I see what you're saying, and you're correct. So,
Jesus.
the plan from the Father was not political revolt.
Right.
Even though many in that time period were expecting that. And that's not what it was. And we as followers of Jesus have to remember that the political situations are not permanent. That's not what we're
Mhm.
fighting for. We're not necessarily fighting for the eternal nature of the USA. We're fighting for God's kingdom,
Mhm.
which transcends our country's uh, time frame.
That's right. And when we look at our history, the Romans struggled with this mightily because they couldn't have a bunch of people that were against their rule and authority hanging around in cities and places where it's like we all need to be together. Otherwise, we got some real tangible threats to deal with on the horizon. The Visigoths, the Goths,
Yeah.
and I mean, to be honest with you, until Caesar, the Celts.
Mm.
So I mean, we have to realize that there are always going to be internal and external threats,
Yeah.
and the way we deal with internal and external threats is don't worry about it. I'm spastic. I have cerebral palsy. Forgive me. So, but anyway, but no, I think it's very important to recognize that people the uh, are the ground in which God builds His kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
He does not build it by, areas of Hawaii or Montana or whatever. It's
Correct.
not about that.
Yeah.
That is for us to sort out amongst ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think when we look at Scripture, I look at the Noahic covenant
Mm.
and I say, okay, at this point on, humans deal with humans. God's like, flooded the earth and said, humanity's gone bye-bye, except Noah and his family.
Yeah.
I'm going to give them the clean slate.
Yeah.
And then Noah lives through this whole thing and quite traumatized.
Yeah.
And then this guy was, I gotta admit, I was quite struck when I read that story for the first time.
So after they get off the boat,
Oh,
they sacrifice thanks to the Lord, and
Right.
then things go off the rails pretty quick.
right, because it's like this guy was an alcoholic determined to get his drink on. I mean, my God, he's like, grow, you grapes, grow.
Yeah.
And then he's like stomping him out, going, I'm gonna love this drink. And then he ties one on, and one of his grandkids comes in, and
Or is it his son?
well, his son was like, "Oh, take a look at Dad."
Yeah.
I mean, this was my family heritage. My entire family was like, "Oh, you have a weakness. Let's sit there and poke at it."
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, but I mean, but that was seen as something to be cursed.
Mm.
But yet, in the Noahic covenant, if man sheds blood, by man, his blood will be forfeit. And so it was reversing. It was like reversing the hallmark of Cain.
Yeah. Oh, I hadn't thought of that before, but yeah, you're right.
But it was like the mark of Cain was like, okay, you guys gotta act nice.
Mm-hmm.
Don't kill the other guy. It doesn't matter what he does. And then God's like, well,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying God made the mistake, but when regarding humans, one must be careful because we're a bit tricksy.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are a tricksy bunch.
Yes.
And when you look at it from God's point of view and you start picking apart our anthropology, our psychology, and you start looking at what He created, I can only imagine Jordan Peterson said something like, humans are capable of such good, but we are also equally capable of such evil.
Yeah.
And and this is up to us. I mean, we're Calvinists at this point of our,
Yeah. Right.
this point of our journey.
Yeah.
And so we're almost kind of like, somebody does something wrong. Oh, of course they did. Total depravity.
Right.
Yay! Total depravity. And so it's almost like we look at it and say to other humans, come on, show me your depravity. You're not going to shock me.
Yeah. And when we can call it what it is,
Right.
then we don't have to demonize humans. We just know that that's their sin nature
Right.
acting to its fullest extent, which we are all capable of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it makes me shudder as to what, humanity after death will be, because in essence will be good whatevers,
Yeah.
I know the Bible uses the word Elohim for basically anyone after death.
Okay.
So when Samuel was called back by the woman, the witch of Endor, it was like, oh, an Elohim comes forth.
Okay.
And so it's like angels, Elohim.
Sure.
It's where we get the Catholic view, angels, people get wings or whatever,
Oh.
turn into angels.
Yeah.
Angels more of a job description
Sure.
as far as I can tell. But anyway,
Yeah.
but what I'm trying to say is that if human, like Daniel Lane Craig, you've heard of him?
Yeah.
He's an apologist. He actually says, if you're, he goes with the idea that our consciousness,
Okay.
our ability to step out of ourselves and view ourselves as individuals, that is the Imago Dei.
Okay.
So if that's the Imago Dei, that which calls you out,
Yeah.
that says, I am separate from this, whatever this is,
Sure.
whether it's trying to be like CCP or your family, you're being called as an individual. God called, when Jesus called the disciples, he's like, Matthew,
Yeah.
buddy. He's like, how do you know my name? It's like, I'm God.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, is he the Messiah? It's like, come on, let's pick it up. We're on a schedule. I gotta move.
And
I've only got a couple of years of that.
The disciples were slow, and so are we.
Right,
Aren't we
right.
thankful?
And so we have to look at ourselves from the point of view of, you've gone to 7 churches. What would you say the percentage of your life has been influenced by church?
100%?
Okay, 100%. So if you're talking to somebody, let's say like, oh, who can we pick on today? We have access to the internet. Is there somebody that's like, oh, I don't like that person, or no?
We'll just say person A. It doesn't have to be particular.
I'm gonna say, oh gosh, I can't remember his name. It's God's holding me back. Anyway. Yeah, this is embarrassing. But anyway, I think when we're looking at people who are atheists,
Okay.
they look at scripture and they say it's stories. This is a common thing I've heard. It's like, it's just stories. It's just stories.
Right.
How would you, living in it, what would you say to that?
I would say that if they haven't read them, they need to actually read them, because
Right.
before I would say that I have been guilty of saying, oh, they were just made up stories. Some 10 guys in a room wrote the Bible. But when I actually opened it and read it, clearly that's not the case.
Yeah.
I also think this is going to sound overly spiritual, but Jesus said that they will be blind and deaf, and so you do need the Holy Spirit to help you to see the truth and the reality of the scriptures. So, I mean, I would say to this atheist, read them, but if you don't believe them, I'm not going to hold it against you, because it's almost not their fault.
Well, I think there are people that are afraid that, like 1950s, where everything was very regimented, where people went to Boy Scouts and people did this. They felt like it was almost like their shoes were too tight.
Yeah.
And because their shoes are too tight, they felt constrained. And then in the 1960s, we had this whole sexual revolution. And then people wanting to carry on the after party, kind of went to the homosexual movement. And then it turned into the, back to the, other things. And I think in regards to letting people live, we're guilty in that regard, because we did not just leave good enough alone. Let the, let the people that wanted to live alternative live. And then once we lost control, we're fed up, we're going somewhere else.
Sure.
And we became, in a way, what I like to call the Qumranian church. So, during the first century, you had the Sadducees and the Pharisees.
Yeah.
And so you got the right and the left. I mean, for crying out loud, Paul, when he was being accosted in the temple, the Romans show up. He's like, "Oh, let me talk to the crowd."
Yeah.
And then once Paul recognized the crowd wasn't responding, he's like, "I'm gonna throw a bomb. I believe in the resurrection of the dead." Then he started. So they turned from fighting him to going Sadducee on Pharisee.
Yeah.
And this Roman dude is just like, what happened?
Yeah.
How did this happen? And so he's like, "Okay, guys, we're pulling out." And he takes Paul with him, straps him over the, gonna whip him. So he puts him out over a table, and Paul's like, "Oh, by the way, is it lawful to flog a Roman citizen?" And then it's like, "Oh crap!"
Yeah.
And the centurion comes out. He's like, "How did you get your Roman? I was born with it." It's just like, and then there was the whole appeal to Caesar thing. I'm seeing so many. There's so many things concurrent going on here that we can look at and go, "Hey, Paul, learn to fight like Paul.
Yeah.
Learn to fight like Jesus."
Yeah.
I mean, you might be killed, but you're dealing with yourself. And, don't be a, what is it? Judah ben Maccabees. Judah ben Maccabees, believe it or not. So, the Romans were not the only people that were governing Jerusalem, Judea area. Before that, it was the Ptolemaic Empire.
Okay.
So this was Alexander the Great going from town to town. Yes, he sacked Jerusalem. And then he goes on and dies in Babylon after kicking ass all over Afghanistan.
Okay.
I mean, this guy was truly something to behold.
They don't call him Alexander the Great for nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
Even Caesar wept at a statue of Alexander the Great, going, "I am so behind the ball." And so you have those types of people. But in the midst of that, everyone's kind of going about their lives. And so Judah ben Maccabees, if you want to, I mean, they're the Apocrypha.
Yeah, I know.
And the Apocrypha talks about in First, Second Maccabees how the Jews rose up against the Greek masters.
Yeah.
And they kicked them out. And then, you know, from Rome's perspective, they're like, "Oh, look, there's a place in between us and our enemies." It was like domino theory, Roman style. It's like, if the Jews go, so does Egypt. And if Egypt goes, we lose Carthage. And if Carthage goes,
Yeah.
then we lose Sicily, then Rome. And so it's like, we gotta go take... So it was like... Jerusalem was like Rome's Vietnam.
Okay. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and so... And then you got the Greek Jews and the Jews. And the Greek... You remember Stephen from... Oh, sorry. I knocked that over. I'm here late.
Oh, there you go.
But it was like, so you got
In Acts and the
yeah, Stephen.
Yeah.
Why was Stephen put in charge of being a deacon? Because the Greek Jewish women were being neglected by the racist Christians that were saying, "Oh no, we're Jews. We're from here.
Right.
This is our land." And even the disciples were like, "That ain't right.
Yeah.
That ain't right. We're all about Jesus. We're all about Jesus." I mean, that was the miracle of Pentecost.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody was brought back together.
Right.
Yeah.
So we. I mean, it's like, well, why doesn't God do miracles today? Why aren't you doing your job as Christians?
Yeah. Right. I heard.
It's pretty simple. It's all out there in black and white.
Yeah. I was reading. I think it might have been. I can't remember for sure. It might have been Rosaria Butterfield that said the problem with Christians is not that they're not Christian enough, or that they're too Christian. It's that they're not Christian enough.
Right.
Yeah, and that has stuck with me. I think that's very true.
Well, I think it's because we're atomized.
Yeah.
You know what that means?
I'm not a lot. No.
All right. Atomization is where, I mean, you're one or a few. You're just kind of out there.
Yeah.
And you feel vulnerable. And even though you may be passing a lot of people that are like, it's like this. Islam.
Okay.
Used to have people that were demi or lesser status.
Okay.
Christians were those people.
Sure.
We're people of the book, but we're not quite Mohammedan Islamic.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, they're our cousins, so we will take a blood tax from them where they redeem their life to Allah.
Okay.
And, you know, it's kind of like Old Testament, if you will, so your firstborn kind of thing, so you can see where there's a borrowing there.
Yeah. So how does that fit with this atomization?
Well, here's the thing. All the Christians were ghettoized. So it's like, hey, you and I were Christians because you used to have to put a little symbol.
Yeah, okay.
And so what I'm trying to say is that this is something the enemy has said, oh, you're going to wear, you know, like the Nazis who got it from the Muslims. Thank you, Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. And anyway, the idea was to distinguish. Now, we can be distinguished in a number of different ways. We're supposed to be distinguished in kind of the, who was that? They say it's,
I need more clues.
yeah. No, he was, Saint Jerome.
Okay.
Saint Jerome once said that, let your witness go before you, and sometimes use words.
Oh, sure.
And so
Okay.
we think everyone's paying attention, and they'll just catch on.
Yeah.
But I think what we need to recognize is that that isn't enough, and so we need to be more public. But being public means that you're going to get hammered.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you recognize that it's too late, you don't want to get socially hammered.
Yeah.
So in order to avoid that, you just kind of let it go, and then it goes on. So back when I was working for the government, everybody would be like, "Oh my God, you're a Christian."
Yeah.
Some people are like, "Oh, that's cute. That's cute. You're disabled and you're a Christian. Oh, you go, boy." And there were other people like, "Hey, dude, how Christian are you?" It's like, I go to church. Oh, wow,
Yeah.
a genuine Christian. Tell me more. And those guys were more or less like, the materialism isn't cutting it for me, so I
Right.
need something else
Yeah.
to get me through and things like that. But I think it's important to recognize that we are not the paper tigers that people make us out to be. Kind of the, not paper tiger, that's kind of a bad way to look at it. Straw man.
Oh, yeah.
There's a little more substance to a lot of us.
Yes.
In that if we have an outlet, we all, I'll give you a list of people I listen to online that are apologetics.
Okay.
Because there's a really good one, Michael Jones.
Okay.
He runs a channel called Inspiring Philosophy. And he goes into the physics, into the math.
Okay.
And presents it in a way where it's like, you don't need a calculus degree.
Okay. You saw my face glaze over.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
And there are other people out there that are really good. There's a professor of linguistics, or not linguistics. He's also a Christian, but Michael Heiser.
Okay.
He's come up with some books that are just going into what the Bible is.
Okay. Very cool.
And if
Yeah.
you're able to look at it for what it is, you can get a better understanding of what it's trying to say.
Right.
Because I think we've adopted too much postmodernism, and we want to project onto the Bible.
Yeah. That's the wrong way round.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we're going to wrap this up. I think this was excellent first start.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you for your kindness and your willingness to do this.
You're welcome.
I hope it doesn't require bravery.
No, this is good. Make it easy.
But no, I hope you'll. I'm not sure if I'm gonna have to chop this up or whatever, but I will. But anyway, this is Kevin. See you on the next bounce.